All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Okay, I'm super excited again today for day three, okay? Because on day one, we talked about, if you were here on day one, type in the chat your biggest aha, by the way. If you were here on day one, I remember Damilola, I remember Tutu, I remember Ifoma, I remember Adewale as well. Let's see who else was here that I didn't remember. Yeah. Um, if you were here on day one, type what your biggest aha from day one was before I tell you what my summary statement was for day one. Okay. What was your biggest aha moment from day one? Okay. That was day two, but I'll take that. You are ahead of things. The possibilities. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So day one, if you remember, we talked about the floor. We talked about raising your floor when it comes to side gigs. We talked about you having big goals and you using a basically being strategic about how you go about chasing those big goals. And I talked about raising the floor, which means setting a minimum standard for what you would accept for income from any of your ventures. Okay. And then we went on to talk about your identity shift. Okay. And you know what? I'm actually very happy because having spoken with you guys that are here tonight, I'm like, that was definitely the way to start because I can tell you that whether you are brand new to medicine in the United States or you've been doing medicine for the last X number of years, at some point, many people ask that question, is this what it is? Like, is this it? I'll go to work at 6 a.m., come back at 6 p.m., go to bed, go to work at 6 a.m. Like, is this all that it is? Is this how I'm gonna build my wealth? But because we have spent so much time in medicine, our identity is usually intertwined with medicine, okay? And so when you start to try to peel apart to try to find who you are, find how you're going to make money, find how you're going to build your wealth, it becomes a little more painful because it feels like ripping apart a part of your identity. But if you remember, the last thing I had you guys do on day one was to declare in the comments. And let's do that one more time. If you want to mute yourself and say it, that's okay. Heck, if you want to open your mic and say it, I am not just a doctor. Please say it out loud. Let me hear it. I am not just a doctor. I don't hear it. Don't mute yourself. Unmute yourself and do it this time. Unmute yourself, then mute yourself back. I am not just a doctor. Okay, I'm seeing it in the comments here. All right, I'll take the comments. I'll take the comments. That works, okay? Because on day one, that was our main thing. And on day one, I showed you how and basically how buying a business can be the vehicle that helps you hit big goals because unlike real estate, and I love real estate, those of you who know me know that we've been buying properties for the last 11 years by the grace of God, and we've done everything from apartment complexes, fixing and flipping. As a matter of fact, today, while I was at work, one big thing I had to triage was getting the professional pictures on our lakefront short-term rental. So this is not a bash on real estate. This is just a case of we came, we saw, we conquered, we've done some things, and now we're saying, I saw these numbers and I could not unsee it. That's why I'm sharing. So yes, so on day one, I showed you guys basically how buying businesses compares with all of these things. And I showed you how, sorry, one second. I showed you how buying a business can basically help you accelerate those goals because unlike property, where a really good property can make you 30 to $50,000 annually in profit, depending on how much you spend buying it, with the same amount of money, you could buy a business that could basically do 5 to 8 times that profit. Okay, so that was day one, showing you the numbers, showing you why we chose why I have pivoted to buying businesses now. Day two. sorry. Also on day one, I showed you where to look for deals. I showed you Biz Buy Sell. That is the biggest repository that we have on the internet right now of businesses for sale. There are a lot of other websites. As a matter of fact, yesterday I also showed you Big Deal Machine, which is Michael Bayer's software tool that scrapes over 847 websites every 4 hours and basically helps you see what's for sale. I will tell you, so Big Deal Machine is still the biggest, even using that, but because it is the biggest. But they find a bunch of other small websites. Every now and then you see something from somewhere else, and that's how I use it. The main way that I use Big Deal Machine is I use it to also filter deals by when they've hit the market. So that was day two. Day two, we talked about the filter. So when you go on Biz Buy Sell, when you go on Big Deal Machine, how do you then decide, is this worth my time or not? Because remember, we set the concept of the floor on day one. So yesterday, in giving you those five criteria, and if you can remember the five criteria, type it in the comments. Okay. But in giving you those five criteria yesterday, okay, what we were doing was establishing a new floor. It was basically a way to tell you you're not going to just go buy anything because you came on the six-figure side gig challenge. You're not just, you wouldn't just go see something and be like, oh, I see a business. Oh, it's in my city. So therefore, I'm going to buy it. No, you are still a high performing professional who has both time and life constraints that you don't just have time for any nonsense, okay? So, yesterday was a practical example of establishing the floor for what you're buying. So, if you don't remember the five things, can anybody remember the five criteria that we talked about yesterday for filtering your deals? Can you do you remember that before I rattle it off? Do, 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 do. You guys know I don't mind pausing, right? I don't mind awkward silence. Doing this for 6 years, I'll pick up my phone and send a text until I see something in the chat. Still nothing on there? All right. Some of you were here yesterday. I remember some of you were here yesterday. So what were the five things we talked about? Oh, hey, Dr. Caroline, how are you? You weren't here yesterday. I know you weren't here yesterday, but if you were, the question was, the question was, what were the five things? If you can remember one of them, just post one of them. What was one criterion that you remember from yesterday for establishing the kinds of businesses that we would buy? Because if we can't remember that, then there's nothing to fund today. Today is all about funding. But I want to make sure that we remember what we did yesterday. There we go. Finally, we have a taker in the comments. Hallelujah. Oh, of course you are. All right. So, yes. Okay. There we go. Okay. So, minimum of $1 million in revenue. So, revenue of $1 to $7 million. Okay, that was number one. Number two was 10 years in business. There you go. Tutu is like on it. 10 years in business or more. Number three was 10 employees or more. There you go. You got okay. Okay. Oh, you have to make me pull it out of you. Okay. All right. Fine. Okay. There you go. Okay. So you were paying attention. All right. So minimum of $1 million. So the five criteria were $1 to $7 million in revenue. And if you missed yesterday, this is your opportunity to recap. I'm giving you yesterday's session in 2 minutes. Your criteria, the buy box that we focus on, the buy box that we spend our time on, the buy box that helps us screen deals fast. Number one, revenue, $1 to $7 million. Number two, age of the business, 10 years or more. Number three, number of employees, 10 employees or more. Number four, profit margin of 25% or more. Now, on each of these things, there is a bit of flexibility in the sense that, yes, would I look at a business with 9 employees? Yes, I would. If it meets all the other criteria and then it's only 9 employees, sure, I would. But the fact is, the rules are there for you to kind of know where your guardrails are so that when you see something that only has 3 employees, you're like, screw that. Like, just keep going on to the next one. Like, scroll past, go on to the next one. Okay. So that was yesterday in a nutshell. That was yesterday in a nutshell. So when you have a business that meets your buy box, that fits your buy box, the question then becomes, how do I determine if it's worth my time in terms of valuation, making an offer? And the second part is, and then the next question is, how do I fund it? Okay. So I've already shown you how we go on websites like, Biz Buy Sell, um, to look for businesses for sale. But I'm just going to walk you through here just real quick, just so that some of you have, something that you can actually like something you can actually act on. Okay, because when I host these things, I want to make sure that whether or not you continue on with us in the inner circle, whether or not you decide that you want somebody to hold your hand as you get the deals done, that at least your time that you've spent, was worth something. Okay, hold on. I can't find the screen that I just clicked on. Oh, there it is. Oh, here we go. Okay. So again, as a way of recapping, close the door, please. We said that we'll look at now, type a city in the chat. Let's see where we go and what we'll use as our case study here. Type a city in the chat so that we have what we'll use as our case study. All right. So somebody yesterday, if I remember, somebody said Georgia, and I don't think we got to it. So I'm gonna do Georgia since Georgia. Okay, let me see. Oh, there you go. Okay, Georgia. There we go. Caroline is like, yes, give me Georgia. All right. So let's see if we can actually do Atlanta. I don't know if it'll let me do Atlanta. Can you see my screen? Confirm you can see my screen, please. So that way I'm not just talking to you and thinking that you're seeing my screen. Can you see my screen? Oh, perfect. All right. So Georgia. So we said the criteria, right? 1 to 7 million. So we're gonna go down here and we're gonna we'll use our filters and we'll say cash flow minimum. If you remember yesterday, or at least based on Monday, based on what I told you, for all of you that are trying to do 250 in profit, that probably means that you want a business that's doing at least 500K in cash flow to start. So we do that. And this is a pediatric practice for sale, cash flow 550. They're asking 2.2. Let me find something else here. Medical practice, strong aesthetic and surgical patient base. All right. So basically, how am I filtering? I'm filtering based on cash flow, based on the goals that I have. I know that I want to make, sorry, based on the goals that you guys mentioned the other day. A lot of you were saying 250 plus in cash flow. I'm factoring in how much my debt will cost. So I'll take a look at this one right here. So 608 of cash flow, they're asking 850. All right. So looking at the numbers on here, I'm going to walk you through the numbers, okay? Because we kind of rushed over them on Monday because it wasn't really our focus. Today is a numbers day, okay? So let's start with the first thing that we're going to start with is the revenue because we're using our filters from yesterday. So gross revenue, $1.3 million. This means, and okay, let me be clear. You all are smart people, but a lot of you have not done anything in business. So I'm going to talk, and sometimes I will talk as if you are brand new to all of this. Pardon me. I'm not calling you stupid, okay? I just know that some people have not done anything outside of medicine, and I don't want to pretend that you understand a term that is not your typical HMP, okay? So gross revenue is the amount of income coming into the business in the last 12 months before any cost of sales or expenses have been deducted. That's the money coming in the door, okay? So out of this money is where all the expenses, all the purchases, all the materials, everything we needed to run the business comes out of the gross revenue. All right. Now, when you are on biz buy sell, they put cash flow as SDE. There are two things, SDE and EBITDA. Because you're going to be looking into business related things, I'm going to explain these two terms for you and try not to go too long. SDE, let's get this in here. Let's zone here. Okay. I'm gonna make this a little bigger. Okay. So SDE is also seller's discretionary earnings. Okay. This is how much the owner takes home after the business expenses have been used. Okay. This is basically like the owner's take home pay. Now, I will also add this includes the owner's salary plus any other owner benefits. And I use the word owner benefits because um, sometimes people run things like people want tax deductions, right? So they'll pay for their car through the business. They'll pay for their house through the business. They'll pay for their shoes through the business. They'll pay for their suit through the business. They'll pay for all kinds of things through the business, but those are not actually like business expenses. Okay. So seller discretionary earnings is usually basically everything that the owner benefits from calculated. So what this means is usually, and I'm going to try not to get too far down the weeds so that I don't confuse you. Just basically think about this as the owner's profit, okay? Okay. The next term that you will often see is called EBITDA. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes. There's supposed to be a comma here. Interest, taxes, depreciation, these are tax terms, and amortization. Okay. These two things are almost interchangeable in that they reflect similar things. EBITDA reflects profit, okay? However, EBITDA is usually used in bigger companies. And the reason is in calculating EBITDA, you're often factoring in like the owner's salary is usually part of the calculation that is taken out before you get to EBITDA. In SDE is normally used for smaller companies. So usually businesses between, you know, $0 to $1 million in revenue, roughly speaking. And these are not hard and fast rules, but this is usually the context where people are using SDE because these are smaller businesses. The owner is the business. You know what I'm saying? Like the owner is it. But in bigger companies, the owner, it could be like some ginormous entity that never actually works in the business. So the EBITDA factors in all the management salaries. So anybody who's managing the company, the manager, the CFO, the CEO, all those expenses get taken out before EBITDA. The reason that I take the time to explain this is that when you get into biz buy sell, in some cases they'll report the SDE, in some cases they'll report EBITDA. At the end of the day, it's kind of similar, except not. Okay. Now, one thing you must keep in mind is that if SDE is reported, if somebody reports SDE and you are not planning to work in the business directly, then you better factor in, you better take away what it'll cost you to hire a manager. Okay? So if somebody reports SD, so basically it works like this. Your gross income, okay, let's just say $1 million, just for ease of numbers. Count the zeros, make it seven, okay. And I'm gonna try my best not to get too far into the weeds here, but your expenses, okay? expenses. Let's say officer, no, not officer. Your expenses here, let's just say salaries. No, let's start with officer salary. Salary. Let's just say this is without 100,000. Okay. Let's just say admin expenses. And it's just a very simple business, just to kind of show you what I mean here. Okay. Admin, let's just say 200,000. Okay. The materials to do the to do the work. Let's just say that is, $300,000. All right. And then taxes, depreciation, amortization. I'm just gonna put that here as something. You normally wouldn't see this anywhere, but just to make my example easy, let's just call this $50,000. All right. So your expenses here, the total here is $60,000 for your expenses, okay? Or I'm sorry, $650,000 as your expenses, which means that your net income on your financials, and we'll get into the financials shortly. The net income that shows on your financials will be 1 million minus 650. Okay. So that is 350. Okay. So now that you have this example here, if we were going to report SDE for this business, okay, the SDE on this business, or the seller discretionary earnings, is going to be this net income plus the salary of the owner, officer salary, okay? So the SDE that will be reported on this business, on this imaginary business here, will be 450, okay? This will be 450. Now, on the other hand, the EBITDA in this case, basically, and normally it wouldn't be the same business that you run both in, but just to show you the difference, because it's very important that you know what goes into the numbers, the EBITDA in this case will be the million minus, sorry, that's already out there. So it will be your earnings before taxes, interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So that will be the net income, and then they'll add back the taxes, depreciation, amortization, and I forgot to put interest here. Okay. So in this case, the EBITDA will be, and how did that happen? Oh, because it was 50,000. Yes. So in this case, the EBITDA will be 400. Okay. So can you see that it's a slight difference in most cases? In some cases, it's a significant difference. Okay. But you just need to know what went into the calculation, because if in one case you have officer salary there, and in another case you don't have officer salary, but you have to hire a manager, you need to know that you have to add back the manager's um, salary. Okay. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do here is let us pretend now, I'm going to, and I'll delete this in the meantime. Let's say that the person that owned this business also, insert row, the person that owned this business also had his car, they usually have it as auto. They usually had he bought his gas with the business, right? He paid for his gas with the business. Usually they'll also have like their phone bill, right? The office phone costs them $20 a month, but then they have a cell phone that they use, right? And their cell phone, let's say that costs them, 1,000 a year, right? When you come to calculate the seller's discretionary earnings, you will take this net income here and you will add back. So the terminology there now is add back. You will add back the salary of the owner. You will add back the owner's car, and you will add back the cell phone. Now, I will tell you this. Some brokers don't do this, and they do their sellers a huge disservice, okay? Because they present the net income as though it were the cash flow. Now, in this case, though, the EBITDA will you will also add these back. But like I showed you, the main difference is that the owner's salary, the officer's salary wouldn't be added back. So I've introduced a couple of terms to you so far, okay? We talked about gross income, we talked about net income, we talked about SDE, and talked about EBITDA. We also now mentioned the concept of add backs, okay? Because when it comes to actually time to value the business, you will need to be able to identify what the add backs are. Some brokers will give you an add back sheet, and you're going to be like, oh, heck no. There is no way that's an add back. So, what exactly is an add back? An add back is something that you look at and you say, yes, I agree, this is not needed to run the business. Like this expense is an expense that the prior owner incurred that I will not be incurring if I own this business. So sometimes the brokers will try to sneak in and say something like, oh, they paid for advertising. But you can choose to do what you want. No, the advertising brought in the income, so don't try to add that back as if it's not an expense. I had one recently. This one was it was like a med spa, like an aesthetics clinic or something somewhere in I think it was Idaho. And they were adding back the salaries of the nurse practitioner and the PA. I'm like, wait a minute, like make this make sense? If you add back the salaries of the nurse practitioner and the PA, who's gonna run it? Are they gonna work for free? And they were like, oh yeah, no, no, this is based on if you're buying this to add to your own practice. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. The nurse practitioner and the PA are part of how this income was generated, right? Like you don't add them back. No, you don't. Okay, because I'm gonna need them to stay there working if I'm gonna buy this business. So brokers play games, right? But so basically, when you have the conversations with the brokers and they send you a profit and loss statement, you know how to now that you look through, you see the income at the top, you see what's called the cost of goods sold at the top as well. Cost of goods sold or cost of services. So let me just explain what cost of goods sold is. Cost of goods sold is basically, for example, let's say you're selling, you know, physical items, okay? Let's say you're selling, like creams, right? And you made $1 million selling the creams, but the creams that you sold cost you $200,000 to produce, okay? When you take that out, I'm going to do one more line here. Let's do another line. The first thing that comes out on it is called the gross profit. Okay? So the gross profit should not be confused with the net profit. Because sometimes I have seen brokers will say gross profit is $800,000. Can you see how tricky that can be? That the untrained eye or the untrained ear wouldn't see, we say, oh, gross profit is $800,000. Oh my goodness, I'm going to pay a 2x. I'm going to do whatever. Gross profit is all the way at the top. Gross profit is before all the expenses. The only thing that gross profit tells you is that for every item sold, they made $800,000 to now start paying their expenses. So don't be fooled by the term gross profit. Gross profit is still pretty high on your profit and loss statement, and it is out of this gross profit that you then subtract so after now we're on C13 that you then subtract all the things, okay? Hold on, let me redo my math here. So yeah. So don't get fooled by those traps that the brokers sometimes. And I'm not trying to bash brokers. Oh, maybe I am. I'm not trying to bash brokers. It's just that when you've looked at so many of these, you see the kind of sneaky things that a few of them put in there. They're like, that's just wrong. That is just wrong. Okay. All right. So now that we've seen the basic structure, so what I did here was just to give you the basic structure of a profit and loss statement or basically what you're seeing on here. The next thing that we then look at, so now we've seen the revenue, we've seen the cash flow or the SDE. The next thing we then look at is what the asking price is, right? Because businesses are valued based on a multiple of the profit that they produce. Okay. So in this case, the business here, the cash flow, the SDE is $608,000 and they're asking 850. In business speak or in acquisition speak, we talk in multiples. We talk in multiples of the SDE or the EBITDA. Okay. So in this example, and I'm going to shift to this side a little bit. In this example, where they're asking 850 and they make 608 in cash flow, to see the multiple they're asking for is 1.4. Okay, let's narrow down the numbers here. You know what? Yeah. So their multiple is 1.4. So basically they're saying that they value this business at 1.4 times the SDE. Okay? So 1.4x the SDE. Now, the next question then is, okay, Chiagozie, what is a good multiple? If you were thinking that, type a 2 in the chat. If you were thinking what's a good multiple, type a 2 in the chat. Wow, we're still just a number 2. There you go. Okay. So the answer is it depends. So these are the things that increase or decrease the multiple of a business. Number one will be what industry. Okay, actually, number one will be the profit the business makes. Okay. And when I say profit, now you know that I mean either SDE or EBITDA. Okay. The higher the profits, the higher the multiple. Okay. The higher the profit, the higher the multiple. Multiple. Okay. The higher the profit, the higher the multiple. The next thing is stability. Okay. Perceived stability of the business. And what are the factors that predict stability? Stability will be persons, people in the business, okay? So these are who are the employees? How many employees do they have? Okay. Are there any managers in place? Okay. If the seller leaves, who can take over? Okay. Because remember, the business has been running with the seller at the helm. So if you're going to take that person away, are you actually still going to have a business left over? Okay. And if the answer is yes, then the multiple goes up. And so those of you that have seen me talk a lot on social media, you said I have a thing in my heart for doctors' offices, medical practices, because a lot of medical practices have the doctor as the sole income producer. And that is a recipe for the minimum multiple. I mean, we're talking like 1x multiple, sometimes 0.8x, because once you take that doctor away, once you take that key producer away, there is no business. It becomes a job and equipment. Okay. So the lower the number of people, not really number of people, but the more key people that will be removed when the business is sold, the lower the multiple you can sell it for. However, if you have all the people in place, you got a manager, a front desk person, a accountant, all the things, people are willing to give you 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x. Okay. Now, perceived stability. So the next thing there is systems. Okay, so if you have systems in place, let's say they have a CRM that they run their business out of, they have SOPs documented, they have, built-in, unique things that they do for themselves, and they can package it and show you this is how the business has run. Look at even us, even through COVID, we did very fine because our systems were on point. The multiple goes up higher. And the multiple is simply a representation of what the market is willing to pay for what the business has packaged. Okay? Now, the next thing that determines the multiple is the industry. So, whereas industries like, um, let's just say home services, etc., if we use the example of a business making maybe $500,000 in EBITDA, 500K in EBITDA, that will probably go for 2 to 2.5 going towards 3x, okay? However, if you go into tech, particularly like all the SaaS companies, SaaS means software as a service. They trade on such ridiculously high multiples, like 15x, 20x, numbers that you hear and you're like, oh my goodness, how? Right? But these ones down here, they can be 2 to 3x, right? So when you go out in the marketplace, you see people talking about, oh, the business is worth 2 to 3 times the profit. It's because a lot of industries kind of fall within this range. But I will tell you, there are certain niches, even in these like huge sectors, that change their multiple. For example, I can tell you HVAC, because HVAC is so hot. People are trading now for like, 5 to 8x, okay? Private equity companies are scooping up these things. If it's an industry that private equity companies really, really want, they drive up the multiples. So that's why things like tech, companies can go for like crazy multiples. So for the most part, okay, I say this not to confuse you, not to make you now be like, okay, so how exactly do I value businesses? For a lot of the businesses that you're going to be looking at, particularly if you follow the buy box, if you're buying between that $1 to $7 million, both revenue and purchase price range, you will find that you're probably going to be somewhere in that 2 to 3x multiple. If it's a really good business, nicely packaged, you may get to 3.5 if the cash flow allows you to. Okay? So, now that you know that, when you now see this business right here, that the cash flow is 608 and they're asking for 850. Remember what I told you about medical practices? What did I say? They tend to sell for lower multiples because it is a solo physician. Guys, I did not look this up before this call, but that's what it is, right? So you see this. This is an established business, 1997. They're almost 20 years, oh no, 97. They're almost 30 years old. They're making 1.3. If this person had simply packaged, like spent the time and built a team 3 years ago, this business could probably be selling for $1.8 million, $2.4 million, okay? But the fact is, they've now brought it to market and they're selling for 1. What did we calculate here? 1.4x. And honestly, the question is if they sell because it's a solo physician. So, as you can see here, they said this is an excellent opportunity for a physician or a group seeking patient volume. They know that they're not selling the business, they are selling the patient list. Okay? Here they say staff will not remain post sale. So can you see if you were looking for an acquisition that will be your passive income, do you see how this business just got crossed off the list? Type something in the chat. Let me see. Let me see what you saw. If you're seeing the thing that I'm saying. If you're picking up what I'm putting down right now, type a 3 in the chat. Can you see how this business, although the numbers look amazing, there you go, Ifama, exactly. Although these numbers look, oh my goodness, I'm going to pay just 850 and I'm going to cash flow 608, but you wouldn't have any employees when you're done. So who will this business work for? Imagine you're a resident, right? Coming out of residency and you're like, you know what? I want to start my own practice from the start. Or I want to own my own practice from the start. Perfect. You can then go buy this business. Here is the kicker. I don't think we've mentioned it here thus far. You can buy this business for $0 out of pocket. Okay. So if you're here and you're, you're I don't even know what specialty this is. Aesthetic and surgical. Okay. Um, so if you're here and you're like in say like family practice or you're a med spa operator, et cetera, whatever it is, you as a physician can go buy this for 0% down. There are banks that will let you do this for 0% out of pockets, 100% financing. But it has to be the right business, okay? It has to be the right business. Okay, so we've talked about two different types of numbers. We've gone over the basic terminology, the basic structure of a profit and loss statement, and how it factors into SDE and EBITDA. And then we've now talked about how SDE and EBITDA factor into the purchase price of the business. You've now heard that as you go up, as the SDE goes up, the value also goes up. Sorry, as the SDE or EBITDA goes up, the multiple goes up. Okay, so somewhere between with SDE, kind of like in the 100K to 300 to I'll say $300,000. Usually you're around that 1 to 1.5x. Okay. By the time you go into SDE, like, 300, I'm gonna say to like, and maybe I'm being generous here, honestly. And they all overlap, right? 300 to, let's just say, you know, a million. And that's a huge jump. Now you're going anywhere between that two. Actually, no, I'll change this. Yeah, actually, that is correct. Two to a million EBITDA, I will probably do up to three. I will probably do up to three. In fact, I'll say 1.5 to 3x, right? Now, by the time you hit a million EBITDA, let's say okay. By the time you hit like a million in EBITDA, and now you're going up to like 2 million, 2.5. A lot of them are still in that. So a million to like 2.5 million, you're probably somewhere around 2.5x to like, I'll say 3.5x. Okay. And these are just broad brushstrokes. I already told you that it varies by industry and varies by all these things, right? Now, by the time you get into like 3 million EBITDA plus, that's when you start hearing people talking about like 5x EBITDA, 8x EBITDA, or 8, just crazy EBITDA numbers, right? I was talking with someone yesterday. The business that he was telling me about was doing 7.5 million in EBITDA, and it was valued at $40 million. So that is a 5x EBITDA. Okay. So the higher you go, the more you can make. Now, let me tell you why this is pretty sweet. Imagine that you bought a bunch of home services companies. Let's say you bought a bunch of plumbing companies, but you bought some small ones, right? Small enough that like they're small. You're like right in this range where Mike talks about, right? 300 to a million. So let's say you bought one that had 500 EBITDA, and then you bought another one to bolt, it's called bolt on, and you did 250 EBITDA, oh sorry, 250 SDE, both SDE. And then you bought a third one that did another 250 SDE, and then you saw a fourth one that does 500 in SDE. Now, the total of this now is 1.5. You're at 1.5 million, okay? But each of these were so small, you bought these at 1x EBITDA, 1x EBITDA, maybe 2x, 2x. So total that you probably spent on these, and don't get confused here. I'm just going to shift this down here, okay? So the amount you spent on these, you probably spent 1 million here. You probably spent, maybe 400,000 here. maybe another 400,000 here, maybe another 1 million. So your total that you spent here is 2.8 million. Okay? But now that you own all these four, you now leave this lower multiple range and you fall into this section here. And now you can sell this business at 2.5 to 3.5x. 2.8, you probably be around that 3.5x. So let's just show you what happens there. 3.5x EBITDA. You can now sell this for 10 million. Okay. So now you bought this for 2.8, you sell for 10. How much did you just make in between? Do your math real quick. Let's call this 3 million here for ease of math. Somebody type in the chat what your profit was by simply buying four of these. I told you it was all numbers today, but I have to take you step by step through the numbers before we talk about funding it. How much did you just make in profit? You bought at 3 million, and because you lumped them together, you're now able to command a higher multiple and sell for this. What's the math here? Type in the chat. I want to make sure that you guys are still here with me before I get into how to fund. Haha, I love it. 7 million before tax. I love it. I love it. Okay, very good. So you just made $7 million. Now, how long is it going to take you to do one, two, three, four? Usually, getting the first one is where the inertia happens. By the time you get the first one, you probably have already built up your pipeline to do the others. And I'm seeing that. Okay. All right. So $7 million in that. Now, so how then can we buy the first one? How can we buy this first business that's doing $500,000 in EBITDA that they're asking a million for an asking price? Let's shift our screen here. Ways to fund. So number one is cash. And I will tell you, this is me training myself to remember that sometimes people have this money available in cash to just spend. Okay. Particularly if you're buying something, let's just say like in the $200,000, $400,000 range, you buy it in cash, you close. I just lost where I was. Here you go. So cash, right? Number two is the SBA loan. The SBA is the governmental agency that backs business acquisition loans. It's called the Small Business Administration. And what they do is that they secure the loans for the banks up to 75 to 85% of the loan, depending on God knows what. But the reason it matters to you is that SBA can allow you to put down 10%. So for the $1 million business that I just showed you on the other page, the $500,000 EBITDA one that you're buying for 2x, the $1 million business there, right? You could put down $100,000. $100,000, okay? SBA. Now, sometimes banks will do conventional loans for acquisitions. But to do that, they usually like you to have been in business for 2 years already. So let's say, for example, you own a med spa, okay? And then you want to buy another med spa. Because you already own a med spa and you've owned it for 2 years, some banks will let you do an acquisition loan for 0% out of pocket. Okay? Some banks also have, and I forget how they're called, the medical I call them the medical practice acquisition loans. These ones will let you do 0% down out of pocket. Okay. So if you see a practice in your area that is for sale, there are banks like Bank of America, and I forget that there's one that starts with a P. But there are a bunch of banks out there actually that will do a practice purchase loan for 0% out of pocket for somebody, in a given field. Okay. Um, Now, in this case, I said you're going to have to put down 10%. So sometimes for some deals, oh, by the way, SBA caps at 5 million. So if you were here yesterday, you see that this is another reason that the buy box also is nice because if you end up buying something less above 5 million, you have to have other ways to fund it, and there are other ways to fund these deals. So now you can buy a bunch of these, get to your $5 million cap, lump them together, and then sell for a higher multiple over time. Now, so I've done cash, SBA, conventional medical practice. Now, the question then is, if you need, oh, sorry, there are a few more. The next one, of course, is seller financing. So some of you were here yesterday. We talked about seller financing, and this is where the owner doesn't take all the money up front, right? Where they get to take a monthly payment or a quarterly payment or an annual payment, almost as a way to it serves a few purposes. Number one, if you get 100%, so it's between you and the seller, right? You can agree on whatever you want, okay? So the seller can give you terms that a bank will never give you. You can say, okay, your interest is 5% when the bank interest rate is 10%, right? It doesn't matter what the bank is doing. It's between you and the seller. So it's usually nice to try to see how much of seller financing you can weave in. The next thing that makes it also good is the fact that with seller financing, the seller is invested in your success because if the business doesn't produce, he doesn't get paid. Okay. So sometimes even the SBA sometimes may require that you add some seller financing to the money stack. So for example, you put down 10%, the seller finances 10%, and the bank finances 80%. Okay, that's how the SBA sometimes will have you pay for this. The other option, of course, is raising capital. Okay. When I say raising capital, for some people, it's raising the down payment. For some people, it's raising the entire thing. So Mike, for example, did a deal, I think it was 2 years ago now. That deal is probably about 2 years old now. They bought a mailbox store, like a mailbox shop. And I think they bought it for 1.3 million. And what they did was they basically reached out to their network and said, hey, we have an investment available. And they laid out the terms. People want cash on cash return, right? Like if I offered you right now, as a matter of fact, we do have a link that I normally share with people for those who are interested in indicating that they'll be interested in deals that we have coming, that to say, hey, if you would like to, invest in our deals when they're available, sometimes you would do debt, sometimes you would do equity, right? When I say debt, let's talk about debt for a second. This means that let's say you invest, $100,000, we can say, okay, you get a fixed return of 10%, of 12%, of 14% per annum, depending on what we end up agreeing on. That means that irrespective of what happens to the deal, I owe you $100,000 plus that amount that we talked about. On the other hand, equity investors, these own the deal with you. So if the deal makes money, they make a lot of money. If the deal doesn't make money, they don't make money, unlike the debt people. So when you're raising capital, these are the two options that you can offer people. But you have to keep in mind that if you're raising capital and there's going to be a bank involved in the rest of the money stack, then you have to be sure that you raise the capital in such a way that the bank is okay with the capital that you raised. So very often, if you're going to raise capital and it's SBA or any kind of like bank financing, you may have to make the capital that you made an equity deal so that the people own the deal with you and they don't own more than a particular amount because otherwise they have to be included on the bank loan. Okay. So these are just different ways. And now another thing, of course, is you can leverage the assets. So what do I mean by leverage the assets? There's something called a leverage buyout. This is basically where you take the assets of a business, usually owned free and clear, or maybe with little financing on them, and you go to a bank and say, hey, this business has, 10 cars that are owned free and clear. Can you give me a loan on the 10 cars to use to buy the business? It's pretty neat, actually. So you can use assets like vehicles, equipment, you can use real estate, that the business owns. What else can you leverage? You can use their accounts receivable. What is accounts receivable? This is like money that is owed to the business. Let's say you have customers that pay on a 30, 90, or 90-day plan. You can take the money that the business is owed to a bank and say, hey, can you not just any bank, but to the banks that do or the companies that do what's called AR factoring, and they will give you a loan based on the expected payments of people that owe that business. So if you have ever done real estate and you thought, you know what, in real estate, there's a lot of creative ways you can finance your deals. With businesses, it is off the chain. And I could go on and on and on. There are other strategies, earnouts, earnings, all of that. But my purpose is not to confuse you tonight. My purpose tonight is to kind of give you like the core that you probably actually use. And then when you get into certain scenarios, you can then get nice and fancy with the other like 150 other ways that you could probably finance a deal. All right. How are we right now? Okay, good. Um, any questions on the ways to fund the deal? Any questions on the ways to fund the deal? All right, no problem. Any questions on the ways to fund the deal? Okay. So I'm going to go back to the question that was here in the chat that said, can you go quickly through EBITDA and SDE again? So let's get back to this screen right here. So basically, think about, imagine that you were running a company, right? And that company made $100,000 every year. No, 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 no. Let's say $1 million every year. The company made $1 million every year, okay? But as you were running the company, money will come in, you spend the money on something, you pay for something, you pay for this, you pay for that. And while you're at Costco buying stuff for the business, unfortunately, you also buy some food for yourself. Okay. SDE basically says that although the net income on the books is 343, SDE is seller's discretionary earnings. SDE will factor in all those things that you bought for yourself with the business money and your salary to calculate SDE. EBITDA, on the other hand, will say no, the person running the business has to be paid. That is an expense. EBITDA will not factor in, will not remove the officer's salary. Okay. So you normally see EBITDA in bigger companies where the owner is not necessarily the person managing the business, where the owner is removed from the business, and so all the officers' salaries have to stay in. That's the best way I can compare and contrast the two. The fact that one of them factors in the owner's salary and the other does, and the other that one considers the owner's salary an expense and the other considers the owner's salary a benefit, a profit. Okay? SDE considers the owner's salary part of the profit. EBITDA does not consider the owner's salary as part of the profit. EBITDA considers the owner's salary as an sorry, not owner, the officer's salary as an expense. Because that's usually where you have like CEOs, CFOs, all of those things. Yeah. Did that answer your question, Adewale? I need your feedback. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. All right, good. Oh, hey, Omega, how are you? I didn't see you hop on. Welcome. All right, very good. Okay. So tonight we walked through three different things. We walked through number one, just understanding kind of how to look at a profit and loss statement, just like conceptually speaking. Top line is gross revenue, cost of goods sold, then you have your gross profit. Then you have all your expenses in a block, including all the salaries, okay? And then you have your net income. Now, to go from net income to SDE, you add back those things. You add back, depending on if you're doing SDE or EBITDA, but you add back the things that are not actual expenses in the business, okay, but are actually benefits to the owners of the business in the form of SDE or EBITDA. And then we went on to talk about how do you value a business? And we said that businesses are valued based on the profit that they produce as a multiple of the SDE or EBITDA Usually SDE used for smaller businesses. And I mentioned that the multiple that is used, there is no hard and fast rule for multiples, but it's based on a number of things. It's based on, the stability of the business, how much dependent it is on the owner's presence, on the systems they have in place, on the number of on like basically how will the business stand when the owner leaves, and then the industry that the business is operating in, and a typical multiples for that industry. And then we talked about how to fund these businesses. We talked about cash. We talked about, SBA financing being the most, I would say, commonly used because banks just love it because the government backs them up to 75 to 85%. Um, we talked about leveraged buyouts, basically, which is basically using the assets of the business as collateral to fund the purchase of the business. And then we talked about seller financing, probably my favorite thing. Even in our transaction right now, we do have some seller financing built in because it does a couple of things for you. Number one, if you can get 100%, then fantastic. Now you can pay the seller based on the proceeds of the business. And number two, that you can negotiate the terms with the seller, what exactly you want to, pay them based on as contrasted from the what's it called? The bank's fixed rules. Okay. So, was that clear? Do you have any questions on that right there? Um, any questions on that? Just like, talk to me. Do you have any questions on how to value a business? How to yeah, questions. This is your opportunity. The seller financing is basically just an instrumental payment. So I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we bought a house in Rochester, and it was what, I forget how much it was, $85,000 or something. This was when we were still getting started in real estate. And the seller gave us seller financing of $5,000. Okay. And what he said was, you can pay me this $5,000, $100 every month, and up to 30 months, so 3 years. But if you pay it off within 1 year, I'll shave off 1,000. Okay. We were still brand new to real estate. I was a fellow at the time. Like we didn't have money. Um, but that was our introduction to seller financing. Okay. The bank gave us a loan, but we didn't have all the amount that was needed for the rest of it. And so that was seller financing. And another example of seller financing, 2 years ago, we bought a house, a lake house, and we bought it for $280,000. $280,000. And the funny thing is that we were buying the house next door, also owned by the same seller. Give me a second, actually. Also owned by the same seller. So he was already getting a nice payout for the other house. But for this particular house, we were having quite some difficulty getting a bank to fund the purchase because it was a manufactured home. And so what ended up happening was we told the seller, we were like, hey, like we want to fund this thing, but the banks aren't. So the seller let us put down $40,000, and he carried a note of $240,000. So basically, every month, where we would have paid the bank a mortgage, we were paying it to the seller every month. I would send him a check. Every month, I would send him a check. Basically, he became the bank. Now, our agreement was that he should carry the note for 2 years. And so at the 2 year mark back in May this year, we were able to refinance. So with the refinance, we were able to pay him off. So he still got his payout, but it was in 2 years. So that is seller financing. So you can do the same thing with a business, okay? Here are some things you can negotiate with seller financing in a business. Let me find my screen again. I forget what my screen was. What was on my screen? There we go. Is this it? No. Trying to find my Google sheet. Six-figure side gig. Oh, come on. Hold on. Untitled spreadsheet. I'm trying to share my screen. But it's going. Oh, there it is. Okay. So some things you can negotiate with seller financing are, well, of course, the purchase price. You can always and negotiate the purchase price. The payment schedule. And when I say payment schedule, I mean monthly, quarterly, annually. Okay. You can negotiate the interest rate. You can negotiate the amortization, the term. So the term basically refers to how long they're going to hold the loan for, and you can negotiate that the amortization. The amortization is how long they break the loan out over. So like you have a 30-year mortgage versus a 10-year mortgage or 15-year mortgage. So you can have a 10-year mortgage that is due in 5 years. That's what we did. In our case, for the house that we had, we did a 20, I think it was a 20-year mortgage that was due in 2 years. So you break it out as if you're paying for 20 years, but in 2 years you have to pay the entire thing. So all of these are negotiable when you do seller financing. Okay. All right. So those are the things. Any other questions? Does this help you? Does this help? Oh, okay. So sorry. There's a question here that says, apart from medical practices, which other businesses will a bank fund at 0% down? Any business that you already own, already have significant experience in, some banks will let you do something like that. Like, will let you do, like, let's say you have a business, like I said, like expansion loans, they would often let you do 0%. But banks have a thing for doctors. They have a thing for doctors. So we write it when we can. Most likely, yes. For them to consider it an expansion loan, they'll expect you to be a similar business. Yes. Like this one that we're buying right now, I got introduced to somebody that was going to do a conventional for zero down, and he was like, "Oh, how long have you had it?" I'm like, "I'm just buying it." He's like, "Oh, okay. When you own it for 2 years, then you can come and we'll do they'll refinance it and take it out. Yeah. All right. So, now, based on what you have learned so far, you should be able to go onto platforms like Biz Buy Sell and start reaching out to brokers and start, getting documents from brokers to start to try your hands on looking at businesses, evaluating them, and all of that. However, we have a program we have a program where our goal, our plan is to basically walk with you as you initiate your journey. Would you like me to share about that program with you right now? If you would like me to talk about it, type in the chat, yes, and then I'll talk about it. Otherwise, we will call it. Okay, perfect. All right, great. Okay, I see two yeses. I'll talk about it. Okay. So the program that we currently have is called the Inner Circle. It's the Inner Circle with Michael Byers, and I'm working with him, obviously. Um, and basically, the Inner Circle is designed to help you take what you have now learned as theory and walk with you side by side as you are implementing it. Okay? As you can see, I can go for days. Well, maybe not days, but I can go for a long time talking about numbers because I've been looking at numbers for a long time. I began looking at numbers with real estate. I taught, our real estate coaching stuff. And now with business, I've known that, like, okay, this is an area that a lot of doctors don't have a lot of experience in. Numbers for physicians very often, not all of you, but for a lot of doctors that I interact with, they see the numbers and they glaze over. They just like, whoo. And so, um, What we've put together is basically a program to help you walk from I don't know where to get started to I'm getting my first deal done. Okay? Um, Michael Byers, as you saw yesterday, has been doing this for over 20 years. He brings his wealth of experience and that sort of nuanced learning or nuanced expertise that allows you, it allows him basically spot red flags from a pretty long while. And so when if you consult with him on a regular day, it's normally be like $25,000 or whatever. But the goal is to help you gain confidence. Let me tell you how working with him has helped me personally. I looked at deals for a long time, okay? And where I would get stuck is I will look at the deal, even when it looked good, I will be a little hesitant, and before you know it, somebody has taken it under contract. But a few months ago, when we actually began the catalyst stuff and the inner circle, I found a deal. I called Mike. I was like, hey, do you mind looking at this deal with me? He sat down with me. We looked over it. We kind of brainstormed what the offer should be. We looked for red flags. It looked okay. We made them an offer. Okay. Because of the flags that he pointed out, I wasn't as like jumpy to get the deal. Okay. So I made an offer that I felt comfortable with based on my conversation with him. They ended up going with a different person's offer, but I was okay because Mike had already pointed out a few things about the business that I had to factor in that made me feel comfortable not jumping up and down to make any kind of offer just to get the deal done. So number one, to have the confidence to make solid offers. Hey, Charita, welcome. To have the confidence to make solid offers, it's good to have somebody with in-depth experience walking with you side by side. So currently, we have a WhatsApp chat. We didn't even do a Facebook group this time around because we're like, you know what? It's currently a handful of physicians on the group. And so you're working really closely with Mike. So you get to meet, like we get to meet once a week, and he gets to basically take deals that are active and rip them apart. Okay. And in some cases, rips them apart and then is like, you know what? That's a pretty solid deal. The deal that I have under contract right now, I brought it to the call, and honestly, I like the deal, so I didn't want him to tear it apart and tell me to throw it away. But I mean, we've been doing this now for a little while, so I let him kind of look through it, and I showed him the numbers. I showed him the P&Ls from the different years. I showed him the you know P&Ls, the bank statement, sorry, P&Ls, balance sheet. Um, I kind of talked about the business through with him, and even the things that were a little off, I pointed them out. And by the time we were done, he was like, "This is a pretty solid deal." So guess what I did? I put my offer in probably the next day, right? And the fact is, with businesses, you don't want somebody that would tell you, "Oh yeah, go buy it." Oh yeah, absolutely, go buy it. No, yeah. I mean, there are deals that he has seen that even my husband goes, "Have you talked to Mike about this deal?" And I'm like, right? So basically, having that person that you can turn to when you have a deal in hand to help to help sort of like get your acquisition mind tuned into what's a good deal and what's not. I personally, I've done program upon program, but the reason that I had Mike be like the main mentor in this program was because he was very accessible. Okay. Everywhere else that I had been, you were a number in a number. Okay. And when I remember one in particular, great program, I loved it. But when I had a deal in hand, thank God Mike was around who was able to help me with that deal because it was available. So that's the inner circle, okay? Yesterday I detailed sort of all the features and the things. But if this is something that you think you would want to be a part of, you think you would want to do, type in the chat me so that I know if I need to continue talking. Otherwise, I'll just have you guys break up tonight. What is this? Okay. So now, yeah, there you go. Good, Jarita. So the inner circle. So I mentioned the weekly coaching calls to help you, not not coaching calls. Coaching calls is not really the right word, honestly. Is weekly deal review. That's really what it is. And then every now and then we bring in other subject matter experts to come and, like teach and stuff. Like this is not a place to come and learn theory, okay? The next thing that you also get is that you get the recordings of our recently completed Catalyst Bootcamp. This was when we spent basically 3 days just teaching, boom, boom, boom. So today, we've done, like, I've given you the framework, okay? Getting, switching to acquisitions, understanding the buy box, understanding the numbers at a very kind of like, I'll call it basic level because in 1 hour I can't, it's hard to baptize you with all the nuances. But in the boot camp, we did all the nuances, okay? So you will get the access to the boot camp replay to basically get the foundation of all the nitty gritty things that we need to go into. And then we mentioned yesterday access to Mike's attorney for an hour. Mike will do a strategy call with you for an hour, wealth building strategy call with you. All of these things are pretty valuable, pretty valuable. And then one other thing that I said that I was gonna do was that because I know now I've been working with us, right? The last six years by the grace of God. Um, and people tell me that I'm able to teach. Okay. If Hama no Meg here, you guys are here. Maybe you can speak on that account, okay? But people tell me that I'm pretty good at breaking things down. So what I've said that I'll do is that in the first, I'll probably say maybe the first 4 weeks, I'm going to be walking with those of you that come on newly to teach you just the fundamentals of business. And when I say fundamentals, I mean like this is a business. This is lead generation. This is sales. This is marketing. This is how you look at numbers. We will go through profit and loss statements at that point, because right now this is a public thing. I can't share my actual P&Ls with you on this because I signed NDAs for them, but I will show you actual P&Ls so that you can look and see that, you know what, when you see this, look for this, look for this, look for that. And that's what I'll be doing in the first 4 weeks with you. Thank you, Omegia. Um, that's what I plan to do in the first 4 weeks with you, so that when you then join the actual inner circle calls with Mike, you're not a fish out of water, okay? You feel like you're in your elements, you feel like you're part of the group, you're bringing your deals because at that point you will have been finding deals and bringing them to the call. Um, and you'll basically be able to hit the ground running. The second thing that I'm also going to be doing is we're going to be doing a 90-day sprint. Okay. Those of you who were in the savvy in our short-term rental stuff know that I was always about the 90-day sprint. I love my 90-day sprint because they gave me results. By the grace of God, a 90-day sprint was what I said we used to basically work on having 4 years in one. The results that people get in 4 years, we usually would try to get in 1 year. Okay. So it also comes at a very interesting time because right now we currently have a deal in hand. We are working through our financing. We're working through our all the things, right? All the things. So like it'll be hiring very soon. We've just done our due diligence. We've just done. I just got my attorney to do the legal due diligence. So like we're in process, but I'm also still looking. Okay, because in case you didn't notice, I'm not trying to buy just one. So we will be doing a sprint together. In addition to your having done the basics, we will then be doing a sprint with you and those who are already in there to work on getting your first deal done. Because when you get that first deal done, it's significant. It sets, I mean, your eyes are open, you don't want to look back, and then you go from there. Now, You're probably wondering and asking yourself, okay, but Chiagozie, what does the inner circle cost? Are you thinking that? If you're thinking that, type a three in the chat. The way I like to think about it is I've given you the value already. I've told you, the weekly coaching calls with Mike. Normally you pay him 25K a half day to work with him, and you get to work with him for as long as you want. The deal document vault easily $5,000 value. That's where you have all his contracts and templates and things. The big deal machine, I keep forgetting to mention that. The big deal machine, as long as you're in the inner circle, you get access to that as long as you remember. That alone is worth $800 a month. Um, the attorney consultation, Mike's M&A attorney, $600 an hour. You get an hour with him. The strategy call with Mike, all of that. The cost, the investment to join the inner circle, while the value that you're going to be getting could easily be worth $60,000 easily. And as a matter of fact, the very first time I met Mike, the program that he offered at the time, Inner Circle, right? When he was doing it with his other business partner at the time, it was $55,000. It was $55,000. Okay. And let me tell you something. I wanted to join at that time. I couldn't pull it off. Okay. However, they shut that down. They parted their ways. When I reached out to Mike and I asked him, hey, would you want to, do this with us, for us, etc. When we got to Inner Circle, he said, I don't want it to be $55,000 this time. Okay. And many people were in his program back then, by the way. As in, he had people, like, it wasn't that he didn't have clients. It's just that he and his partner broke up, like they fell out. Okay. He was like, because I know we had a lot of good people that would have been a part of it that didn't make it in there because it was priced at $55,000. And I'm like, all right, what are you gonna make it? Because I know, like Mike is making he told you guys last night, 135 to 140 million annually, okay, in his businesses. So when people say, like this for him is like, let's just play and make some extra money. Like he doesn't, yeah, anyway. But he decided not to make it $55,000. He did not even make it $50,000 this time around. He did not even make it 40. Okay? Easily. Remember I showed you guys yesterday I mean even tonight. You saw it on there. You can buy a business that's cash flowing 680, right? You can buy a business that's cash flowing $500,000 annually. Will it be too much to pay 50K to learn how to buy a business that's cash flowing 500K annually? I don't think so. Because you pay that, I mean, in the first year of owning that business, you pay that back multiple times over. Now, it wasn't even going to be 30K. Actually, maybe it is 30K. But what we decided to do was to make it an entry fee of $15,000, entry fee of $15,000 and 1,500 a month. Okay. What does that do for you? Number one, it ensures that anybody walking through the door is a committed person. People don't throw around $15,000, generally speaking. And number two, it frees you up to then cash flow this out over time so that the day you decide that you know what, I have bought my business. Let's say you come in and you're off to the races, you get your business, you find your business within the first, let's just say 6 months, and then it takes you 4 months to close, right? That's 10 months. You can decide, you know what, I'm done with the inner circle. I don't think you would do that, but because the community we've built is pretty solid, but you have the option. Okay. Let's say you come in and within, you're going and it's like 9 months, then you find your business. Great. That means that you were looking through multiple businesses and getting feedback from someone who's experienced and not buying a turd sandwich. Okay. So again, $15,000 and then $1,500 a month. That is the investment for the inner circle. But what I also like to make sure I leave people with is the understanding of the actual cost of inaction. Okay. If you did, like when I, the first business that I got that Mike helped me look at, I was gonna pay $1 million, but he helped me catch what was wrong with it and was able to save that. And so I like to bring the opportunity to everyone now because I'm like, listen, I am sharing with you what I am currently going through, what I've currently worked with, and how I've gotten the business that we're working on. And so this is basically an invitation to you to basically um, come learn from Mike. All right. So that is the inner circle. If you have any questions, you got a text from a phone number this evening. Um, if you have any questions, oh, actually, you know what? You're here. Ask a question. If you have a question, ask a question before we hop off. It's just a couple of you, and I'm going to stop the recording. Oh, wait a minute.